Here we are, 6 days after Christmas. It's supposed to be a holy time, and last week we told the story of the birth of Jesus. Finally, after the long Advent time of waiting, the amazing event that we anticipated, prayed for, celebrated, has occurred. As the angels exclaimed when they announced the birth of Christ, and as we sing each week, glory to God in the highest. Yet here we are, many of us anyway, wrapped up in thoughts and activities much more mundane. Figuring out when to take down the tree, still picking bits of wrapping paper and scotch tape out of the carpet, playing with or struggling with our new gadgets, those Fitbits and Apple Watches. I'm guessing that at this point in year zero's equivalent of today, even Mary, Holy Mother of Jesus, might be bogged down in, how do I get this breast pump to work anyway? Or, hey Joseph, I'm afraid we don't have enough newborn diapers to get through the weekend. And then there are the last invitations of the season. Should we go to that New Year's Eve party, or would we rather just stay home? But just the other day, a miracle occurred. Of course, I realize that Jesus wasn't born just the other day. That miracle happened, as you well know, several thousand years ago. The miracle I'm talking about is what it means for us today and every day. That the Nativity story is one of creation, a story of God coming to us in human form of Jesus and giving life to his people over and over again. And today's gospel reminds us of the magnitude of what we have just experienced, the incarnation, which is the heart of Christmas. The author of today's gospel, John, isn't always the most direct guy in town. He's more of a poet than an historian. One of my clergy friends once said, if you want to understand the Christmas story from the outside, read Luke. But if you want to understand the Christmas story from the inside, read John. So we read, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came into being through him. What has come into being with him was life, and the life was the light of all people. Most of us have heard those words dozens, maybe even hundreds of times. Why do we read them again and again? It's, of course, a story of creation. No accident that John starts his writing with the words in the beginning, just as the book of Genesis does. John reminds us that creation isn't a thing of the past. It isn't just something back there in the Old Testament. God made a new beginning with Jesus. And he makes a new beginning with us. Our gospel today is also a story of the incarnation, God coming in human form in Jesus, the Word becoming flesh. I suppose it's always great to be reminded of the beauty and magnitude of God's work in creation, in the incarnation. But I think we read and reread these words from John because they also invite us into that place of awe and mystery and wonder. John's poetry is a testimony to the light and life of God. When we hear this introduction to the book of John, most of us assume that he's talking about Jesus, and of course he is, the Word becoming flesh. But I don't think it's only about Jesus. What if it's also about us? About the Word becoming flesh in us as well? About us being the light of the world? God made himself in human form so that we could see in ourselves and in everyone around us the presence and spirit of God. As John says, to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God. And my favorite passage from today's gospel, from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. Our belief, our receiving of Jesus, our faith, allows us to see the blessings, allows us to know that the secret is here, right here. A few months ago, I was asked by the priest at my sending church if I would give the homily on an upcoming Sunday. And if you're a postulant like me, the correct answer to that question is yes. When I checked the lectionary, I was terrified to realize that the gospel reading for that week was the Beatitudes, from the Sermon on the Mount, one of Jesus' top 10 sermons by people who rate those kinds of things. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, etc. What could I possibly say about the Beatitudes that hadn't already been said? So since the word beatitude means blessing, I decided to spend a day blessing everything that I encountered, to maybe get inside the concept of blessing and have a better understanding of that gospel. When I took the dogs for our morning walk in the woods, I blessed the woods. I touched the gray, bare branches of trees and wished them well. I blessed the deer that had left hoof prints in the snow. I stood in the sunshine and felt the presence of God as I blessed the hawk who watched us from the treetops. On my way home from the woods, I blessed our house, our neighbors' houses, and all within them. And they felt a little like holy places. Later on my way to work, I asked God's blessing on the cars and on my fellow Ogden Avenue drivers, even the one who cut me off so that he could turn into McDonald's. As I drove past, I blessed the homeless guy who's stationed outside Trader Joe's. I stood in line in Jewel and whispered a blessing to the toddler who sat in the cart ahead of me in line. He glanced at me, looked back at his mom, turned back to me with a huge smile and bright, shining eyes. His delight in seeing a face that looked a bit like his own was obvious, and I couldn't help but imagine that's exactly how God must feel when he looks at us and all that he created. And at work, I said an inward blessing for my patients, for their courage, their struggles, and the hope they represent. And an interesting thing happened. As the day went on, it was increasingly clear to me that I wasn't giving blessings. I wasn't bestowing goodness or holiness. I was merely seeing and celebrating the holiness that was already there. I was seeing God's presence in all the pieces of my life. I noticed that time had slowed down a bit and everything had a sweetness and a sheen that I hadn't noticed before. And the boundaries between me and them felt like they were dissolving. I couldn't help but feel closer to everything I'd blessed that day. God was there, right there, in me and in everything in his creation. There's a shift when we notice and affirm the sacredness that lives in each of us, when we can look at the people around us and see the face of God, and when we can feel him celebrating the unique and amazing and beautiful and broken creatures that he made. What if we decided to join the party? What would it cause in you to see yourself as holy, bearing holiness that is our Christmas gift from God, God becoming flesh? What would happen if God's word spoke through your life? If you saw your gifts and talents as unique and preparing you for the something in the world that only you can do, that will remain undone until you step in to do it. And when you begin to feel your gifts as needing to be shared with others to make a difference in a world that hungers for goodness. When you can feel your gifts reaching out and wanting to connect with the rest of creation. What is God calling you to do with that? As a postulant who's on the journey to possibly become a deacon, I think a lot about call, about what God is calling me to do. An important part of the discernment of a deacon, of any clergy, is to ask and re-ask the question, what did God put me here to do? Or in the words of the poet Mary Oliver, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? But as you well know, God doesn't just call potential clergy people. He calls us all. He calls you. In this new year, with its promise of new beginnings, A door opens for us to see ourselves the way God does and think of ourselves as the embodiment of His creation and His incarnation. When we look at ourselves with a new sense of wonder and hope, what does that look like? Maybe there's a ministry that you never before imagined, feeding a hungry person or a hungry heart. When we look at ourselves as one of the miracles of creation, what does that stir in us? Maybe there's a goodness that needs to be done or a wrong that needs to be righted. Maybe that lonely person who lives next door could use a call or your strong back and snow shovel. Or maybe you have forgotten how to ask for help, to give someone else the opportunity to use their gifts to grace your life. When we look at our lives as the coming to earth of God's hands and feet, as the holy living sacrament that we all are, what do you see? What does that inspire you to do? Maybe we can see anew the gifts and talents that we have, the unique contribution that God put each of us here to make. So in addition to that New Year's party invitation, there's another invitation in today's gospel, an invitation from God to see ourselves with new eyes, to see ourselves as God's beloved, and to see ourselves as the result of God's yearning to bring His love and hope and healing to earth. May our lives be, as John says, the true light which enlightens everyone coming into the world.